Hi, scholars. Welcome to Lesson 9 of reading today. Just a quick note before we jump into our work on Lesson 9. You'll notice that Lesson 9 today, next reading class, we're going to actually jump to Lesson 11. And you might think, wait a minute, what about Lesson 10, Mr. Long? We're actually going to come back to Lesson 10 after Lesson number 12. And don't think, oh, I'm just going to work ahead and do Lesson 10 right now. Lesson 10 is actually going to look different than it does in your reading book. So don't work on Lesson 10. We're going to go 9 today, then next time 11, then 12, and then you'll see what we're going to do for Lesson 10. All right? Let's get going on Lesson 9. All right, scholars, getting started on our work for Lesson 9. Touching the first column. Column 1 is purple today. Word 1 is constant. What word? Good, constant. Something that is constant doesn't change. If a car goes at a constant speed, that means the speed does not change. If something's at a constant temperature, the temperature doesn't change. Word 2 is sir. What word? Good. Word 3 is season. What word? Excellent. We are soon at the season of fall. Season. Word 4 is 70. What word? 70. Good. Word 5 is daylight. What word? Excellent. Do you remember the antonym or opposite of daylight? Daylight, nightlight, nighttime. Word 6 is hurting. What word? And word 7 is wintertime. What word? Excellent. Wintertime is a compound word. Winter and time makes wintertime. Scholars, let's go through the purple column the quick way. Starting back at the top, all the way down. Here we go. Constant, sir, season, 70, daylight, hurting, wintertime. Column 2 is pink. Part of each word is underlined, so I'm going to ask you each part of the word, and then the whole word. Listen carefully. Fingers pointing. Word 1, what's the underlined part? Tilt. What's the whole word? Tilted. Very good. Word 2, what's the underlined part? Cloud. What's the whole word? Cloudy. Excellent. Word 3, what's the underlined part? Friend. What's the whole word? Friends. Word 4, what's the underlined part? Splash. What's the whole word? Splashing. Word 5, what's the underlined part? Reach. What's the whole word? Reaches. And word 6, underlined part? Honk. Whole word? Honking. Scholars, let's do column 2 the quick way, all the way down. Whole words. Here we go. Say them aloud with me. Ready? Tilted. Cloudy. Friends. Splashing. Reaches. Honking. Well done. Column 3. All the words in column 3 name places. Number 1 is South Carolina. What place? Good. Place 2 is Georgia. What place? Excellent. Scholars, South Carolina and Georgia are 2 more states in the United States, like Kentucky and Michigan that we talked about earlier. Minnesota, the state we live in. Place number 3 is Newman's Lake. What place? Great. Number 4, that place is Jackson Lake. What place? Well done. And number 5, that place is Clark's Hill Lake. What place? Great. Let's do all of column 3 the quick way. We're back up here at the top. Ready? South Carolina, Georgia, Newman's Lake, Jackson Lake, Clark's Hill Lake. Readers, if you need to pause for a moment and read any of those vocabulary words and practice them, go ahead. And then we'll move to part B. So today, scholars, we're going to have our next story about Henry and Tim. But first, we have an information passage. Let's read the title of that together. Ready? The Sun and the Earth. Here's a rule about the Earth and the Sun. The Earth is moving around the Sun all the time. Scholars, let's say that rule together. Ready? Right here. The Earth is moving around the Sun all the time. The Earth makes a complete circle around the Sun one time every year. Listen to that rule again. That was important. The Earth makes a complete circle around the Sun one time every year. A year is 365 days. So it takes the Earth 365 days to make a complete circle around the Sun. So scholars, how many days are in a year? 365. So how many days does it take the Earth to circle the Sun? 365. So how many years does it take the Earth to circle the Sun? 1 year. That 1 year is 365 days long. Tracking finger ready. The picture shows the Earth at 4 different times of the year as it circles the Sun. So scholars, there aren't actually 4 Earths. It's showing 1 Earth at 4 different seasons of the year. Touch the picture of the Earth during winter. Notice how much of the Earth is in shadow and how much is in sunlight. Follow the arrow around the Sun and name the season that is shown by each Earth. Start with the Earth at winter time. Here we go, everyone. We're going to name those 4 seasons. Ready? Spring, summer, fall, winter. Let's go one more time. Spring, summer, fall, winter. Do you know the order of those 4 seasons? If you don't, you should work on memorizing that. Here we go, one more time, starting at winter, winter. Spring, summer, fall. Remember, the Earth is in different places at different seasons of the year. Scholars, pause for a moment and read that information passage to someone before we continue. All right, we are ready for part C, our next story about Henry and Tim. Please make sure you're following along with me, finger pointing, or bookmark to track, or index card, and make sure you're following along in some way. Flying with the flock. After the geese from the large flock finished talking with old Henry, they went over to their flock. As soon as they had left, Tim said, "When is that other flock going to fly?" "Tomorrow," Henry said. "We planned to fly tomorrow, didn't we?" "Yes," Henry said. "Well, why did you say I would fly with them? I thought I was flying with you." Old Henry said, "Tim, I'm not sure I can make it all the way to Florida. If you go with them, they'll drop you off at Crooked Lake." "But what will you do?" Tim asked. "Aren't you going to fly with them too?" "Well," Old Henry said. He wanted to tell Tim that he didn't plan to go any further south, but Tim looked very sad. So Old Henry said, "Well, I'll go with them as far as I can. I'll fly with them tomorrow, and then I will see how I feel at the end of the day." Scholars, hold that spot for a moment. So, did you notice that Henry didn't tell Tim what he really wanted to do? What is it that Henry really wants to do? Right, he wants to stop, right? He doesn't want to fly any farther south. But what did he now tell Tim he would do? Yes, he said he'd fly with him the next day and go as far as he could. So, scholars, Henry's already changed his mind again to help out Tim. He's being very just. "Well, I'm going where you go," Tim said. "If you fly with them after tomorrow, I'll fly with them. But if you don't fly with them after tomorrow, I won't fly with them." "We'll see how it goes tomorrow," Henry said. So, the next morning, more than 80 geese took off from that pond in Kentucky and formed a great V in the sky. The leader was near the front of the V, but he was not at the very point of the V. He was back a few places so he could see the front of the V and honk out orders to the other geese. Old Henry and Tim were far behind the leader. Tim was right behind a young goose. Old Henry was in front of one of the older geese. So everyone, hold that spot with one of your fingers, or keep your bookmark there. Let me ask you a couple of questions about this picture. I'm going to scoot mine over so you can see it. So, touch the point of the V. Good. Is the leader at that point? No. Remember, the leader is back a little bit from the point, so he can see the front of the V and give the orders. Now, find Henry and Tim. They're pretty far behind in the V, aren't they? That'll be important a little bit later, so make sure you're noticing where they are. All right, I'm going to continue right here. After the flock stopped climbing, it was nearly 2 miles high. Tim called out to Henry, "I noticed that it is a lot easier to fly than it was when you and I were alone." "Right," Henry said. "It's easier flying in a large flock." "Why?" Old Henry explained. "We are behind a lot of other geese. Those geese fly through the air and leave a trail of wind that moves in the same direction the geese are moving. We're flying through that air, so we don't have to work as hard as the geese up front. So scholars, if you take another good look at this, you can see the darker air here, right? This darker blue. And then back here, it's a lighter blue. So that lighter blue air is moving in the direction the flock is moving. Going through that light blue air would be like riding your bike in the wind. It's a lot easier than riding your bike against the wind. So now that they're with this group and they can fly further back, like they are right here, it's a lot easier to fly. They're not going against the wind. Tim said, "That's good for us, but I sure wouldn't want to be one of those geese up front." Henry said, "All the geese that are up front take turns being the first goose in the V. They fly at the point for an hour or more and then change places with another goose." Then Henry noticed that his wing wasn't as sore as it had been. He hadn't been thinking about that wing because it hadn't been hurting. Henry realized that it hadn't been hurting because it didn't have to work as hard as it did when he and Tim flew alone. Henry said to himself, if it doesn't get any harder than this, maybe... Hold that spot, scholars. Can you think about what might he be thinking, right? This ellipsis, he doesn't finish his thought, but can you tell what he might be thinking? Did your answer relate to him thinking, if it doesn't get any harder than this, maybe I could go further or go all the way to Florida? He still wasn't sure how he would feel the next morning when the rest of the flock was ready to fly again. Later that afternoon, when the sky was starting to get very cloudy, the great V of geese went lower and lower through the clouds and came out of them above a beautiful green lake. Tim asked, "What's that lake?" Henry said, "I don't know. This is not on the route I've taken. We always land at Clark's Hill Lake. It's much bigger than this lake, and it's farther east." Then Henry asked the old goose behind him, "What's the name of that lake?" "Jackson Lake." About 10 minutes later, the flock landed on Jackson Lake. So everyone, let's just check in on a couple of things at the end of our story today. So what was the name of the lake where they landed? Right, Jackson Lake. Had Henry ever landed there before? No. Remember, he's always landed at Clark's Hill Lake, not at Jackson Lake. All right, scholars. So let's take a look at your packet for today. Your packet work for this lesson. Sorry, mine was buried under some other stuff. So lesson 9 in your packet, you get to make up some questions today. So it says, think about the stories we have read about old Henry and Tim. So it doesn't have to just be about today. Think about everything you've been reading about Henry and Tim. Write 3 questions you could ask someone about the story. Right? So think about if you were making a little quiz, right, or a little test about this story to see how well people have been reading and paying attention to the story. Good question starting words. So here are some good words to start. If you're having trouble thinking about the first word of your question, those are some good question starters, right? Like who, blah, 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 blah. Or when did blah, 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 blah. Where did do, 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 do. How is Henry's wing, blah, 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 blah. How did Henry's wing get hurt? Could be an example. You can use that one if you'd like. But again, scholars, what I just did up here in this box, those are good words to help you. Those are good first words on questions. Right? Extra challenge, you could try to use a different question starting word for each one. So you're going to have 3 questions to do today. Right? Remember, questions end with a question mark. And then, scholars, I want you to also try to answer the question. So when you write the question, do you know the answer to the question? And hopefully, yes. Right? You can look back at our 9 stories we've had so far. Right? Think about what's happened, what you could ask people about what's happened. That's your task for today. And then remember, scholars, our next lesson is going to be lesson 11. We're going to skip 10 and come back to that later. And it's going to look a little bit different than in your book. So don't use what's in the book for lesson 10. All right? Good luck. I'm looking forward to reading your questions.